Hey guys, welcome back to the Cutlass Customs YouTube channel. We are back working on the 71 Cutlass today. Remember in the last one, we got the outer wheel well all the way finished up. So now it is actually time to get our quarter on. This is gonna be huge, and this is pretty much gonna finish up this entire side metalwork wise. So first thing we have to do before we start welding is actually get this quarter trimmed up a little bit. So I'm just gonna follow the screw holes that I made right here. That way we can get it cut as close to this as we can. And then once that is pretty much trimmed up, we'll set it on here, screw it into place, outline where the quarter is laying, and then we will cut the actual quarter of the card to match the aftermarket quarter.
So it took me a while to finally figure out where I wanted to cut this. The problem is usually when you do quarter patches or quarter skins, you want your weld seam to be on a body line just because they are so strong. Because if you do it in the middle of the quarter panel, it is going to warp as you weld. But on this quarter, I kind of didn't really have a choice because I didn't want to go all the way up. So I'm just going to have to do a couple tacks and keep my panel as cool as I can. And then any warpage I will have to fix after.
Okay, so the quarter is semi-mocked up into place. Before I clamp all the bottom and do the spot welds on the wheel well, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start kind of shaping this metal and tacking it into place. That way we can get this where we want it, and then this will clamp up and pull tight. So I'm gonna grab the welder. I'm pretty much just gonna tack this into place. Then we're gonna cut this off, tack this spot, and then we'll be able to clamp it up and do our spot welds, and then we'll final weld the quarter.
So once I got the whole front of the quarter pretty much tacked into place, you can see I had to do a lot of cutting in the rear just because the shape of it was just barely off and the body lines on the bottom did not line up. So I had to cut them and move them, make them line up, and then add in separate patches for those pieces. Like I said, these patches are never perfect, but it would be way harder to fabricate this piece by hand. Instead, you can just buy this patch that's semi-good and modify it and make it fit the car. And then earlier, I also talked about how since we're welding in the middle of the panel, we have to be a little bit more careful about warpage. So instead of doing 4 or 5 tacks this time, I do about 3 tacks, and then I make sure that the panel is cool, and I touch the panel with my hand to make sure it's cool. That way we just don't have any unnecessary warpage in the panel. Now, I want you to notice, since I was done welding, it was time to grind my welds. And as I ground, I would grind about 4 inches and then I would cool the panel. Now, going back to what I said earlier, this is just because this is in the middle of the panel. And when you're grinding, you are creating heat. So the panel is going to get hot and it is going to warp. You can warp your metal while grinding it. So take that into consideration and make sure to try and keep it as cool as you can. If this were on the body line, we wouldn't have to worry as much. But since it's in the middle, we definitely need to take precautions. To finish it up, I used a light to find all of the holes that were still in the weld, and then I tacked those shut. And then that pretty much finished up the passenger side metalwork. It feels so good to finally get this done, and it's looking so good. I'm excited to jump on the other side and get that finished.
Okay guys, made some progress on the Cutlass. The quarter is finished. So the passenger side is pretty much all the way finished up. This side was so much work and there was so much metal work that had to go into this. I really didn't see a lot of the rot on the inside at the beginning, but I'm so glad and I'm so happy that we got all of it taken care of. This side is looking so good and I can't wait to get the other side done to see this car back on its frame. But the quarter came out absolutely amazing. Once this is epoxied, you're never going to be able to tell that we even did a patch here, which really that is the goal when doing metalwork, is you want people to really not be able to see what places you had to patch so it all looks factory. The only way that you would ever know that this got this patch here is if you strip it all the way back down to bare metal. So now that the passenger side is all the way finished up, I'm going to push everything outside, flip the car around, that way we can start on the driver's side and get the metalwork, pretty much the exact same metalwork that we did on this side, done on that side. So let's get everything pushed out, flipped around, and then let's take a look and make a plan on what we're gonna do for the other side.
How did we get here?
Okay, so one of the questions that I recently got was, how do you know where to cut? How do you know what to cut out? So on the other side, we only cut out this part on the quarter and patched it because the rest of the sheet metal was good. Remember, I always try and cut out as little as possible, leave as much OEM metal as I can. In this case, they put a patch right here, so we had to cut where they put the crappy patch. So really, this side, we're gonna be having to patch this whole entire side. Okay, well, change of plan. I'm gonna get this car out of the trailer and then explain what is going on. We made it. So this is the 1972 Chevelle that I was working on about a year ago. It's been in my garage just sitting. The guy that owns this is actually the same guy that owns the Cutlass that we are restoring right now. So before I explain anymore, we actually gotta go get one more thing. So I'm gonna load up the trailer quick. We're gonna go grab it. We'll come right back and then I'll explain everything. Okay, so this quarter fits like trash. You can see it is probably 1 inch to 2 inches low on this side right here, and the problem is the quarter has to line up with the back of this because that's where the bumper sits. So we can't go any higher with it, and we also really can't do anything with this down here, because the problem is I took a measurement from this body line to this light right here, and it's the same as the other side. Really, it's 1/4 of an inch longer, and then it's a couple inches longer up here. So I'm not really sure what I'm gonna end up doing right now. I have to get the Cutlass body back on the frame. That way I can take measurements and see where my wheel well is supposed to be compared to the other side. And then we can kind of start to cut the quarter and get it shaped after that. So Cutlass body is gonna come off the body cart, and it's not gonna go on this Cutlass frame. It is gonna go on the Chevelle frame because we already have all the QA1 and aftermarket suspension on this frame. And my buddy decided that he wants to use this frame for the Cutlass just because the Cutlass is a little bit closer than the Chevelle. So first things first is getting the Chevelle body up in the air, rolling this frame out underneath, rolling the Cutlass frame underneath the Chevelle, and then we will put the Chevelle frame underneath the Cutlass after we cut it off the body cart.
Now I'm getting pretty good at pulling these bodies off of the frame. I've done it so many times now, and I kind of have a system that works, and I'm able to do it in my driveway with just basic tools that I have or that I've made. Now, mark my words, one day on this channel, you're going to see a lift coming in the garage. That is going to make my life so much easier, and I am going to manifest that now. But as of right now, I have to put my money towards other things, so I'm gonna have to stick to using all of these tools and just doing them by hand. Now let me tell you, during this, the house looked so cool. We had both of the cars off the frames, we had the Blazer off of the frame, so I had 3 frames sitting in the driveway with one body sitting in the air, the other body on a body cart, and then the Blazer body on the rotisserie. When I was little and wanted to be a car guy, this is exactly what I imagined my house looking like.
Oh my gosh, guys, we are almost done. So we still got the Cutlass body and the Blazer body right there, and then both the frames right here. But we got the Chevelle thrown on the Cutlass frame, and it is inside the enclosed trailer with all the parts now. So now I can take that to my buddy to have him store until we finish the Cutlass, and then the Chevelle will come back over and we'll finish that. But this is the frame, or the new frame pretty much, for the Cutlass. We already did the bracing on this frame, and this has all QA1 suspension already installed because that's what we were going to run on the Chevelle. Brand new body mounts. So this is pretty much ready to have the Cutlass body set onto it. So what I have to do now is I have to cut all of the mounts that I made. So all these supports, I have to cut them off. We have to grab my jack stands, lift it up off the body cart, get the body cart out of the way, and then we'll push the frame underneath and then lower the body back down onto the frame. So once that's finished, that will pretty much be it for mechanical stuff. I'm gonna have to bolt the body down to make sure it's where it needs to be, and then we'll finally be able to finish up the metalwork on this passenger side of the body. Another cool thing is now that it's down off that, we can do all of our metalwork up top. So really in the next little bit, we're gonna be completely finishing this body, and then it will be time for pretty much mock-up assembly. So I still have a little bit of time left, so I'm gonna try and get everything moved, this thing cut off and put down on the frame, and then everything pushed back inside.
So like I said, first thing I had to do was actually cut the bars that were holding the Cutlass body to the body cart off, and then I was able to roll the body cart out, roll the frame underneath the body, and then carefully lower the body onto the frame. Now, you have to make sure that your body is going down evenly and it's evenly spaced on the frame. So you have to take lots of measurements to make sure the rockers are even from the outside of the frame and everything is right where it needs to be. You can actually use your body mounts as a reference just to make sure the body is going down in the correct spot.
Okay, so the Chevelle is back on the frame. Now it's just sitting on there because I had to get everything inside. The weather is getting pretty cold here in Utah, and all of this moisture will start to rust all this metal. So now that I got it back inside, I can actually start working on it. One of the first things that I have to do is I have to get this bolted down to the frame. You want all of the body mounts to be tight because it will pull the body a certain way. And in order for us to finish the metalwork on the quarter, we need to take lots of measurements to make sure the other side is exactly the same. So we want to make sure everything is tight and good before we take any measurements. And not only that, when I pulled the Cutlass off the body cart, this is what I had the standoff bar welded to on the body cart, and when I pulled it off, it actually pulled the whole entire bottom of the body mount off with it because it was so rotted. So I actually am gonna jack up the front of the car, do that repair first, that way it will be finished and done, and then I'm gonna bolt the body down to the frame.
But this was such a surreal moment, seeing the Cutlass body on the Chevelle frame for the first time. I really like the way that the QA1 suspension makes the body sit. It makes them sit a little bit lower than factory, but not too low, and it gives it a really sporty look. So like I said, the first thing that I actually had to do was to lift the body back up off the frame, just the front of course, and then repair both the driver and passenger body mounts. They of course were all the way rotted through, so I had to just cut out some pieces of metal, drill some holes that the bolts will go through, and then weld those patches on. So once the Cutlass was repaired, it was time to get it up on these wheel stands that I made. These things are super nice because now I can get underneath it and do all the fabrication that I really need to get done, and it would be really hard to do it if it were on jack stands. These just make it pretty simple to do all my metal fab and all my body work. But I just had to take a second and take a step back to look how good this thing was coming out. This car really has come such a long way in the last couple of months.
So Cutlass is up on the wheel stands. You can see there's plenty of room for me to work underneath this. That is the reason why I built these. One of the things that you saw me do while I was under here is I actually tapped all of the body mount holes just to make sure all of my bolts go in smoothly. And then all of my body mounts are actually bolted up. So there are 2 here, 2 more here, 2 up here, and then 2 more all the way in the front. And you can see this one right there. So everything is tight. And the reason that I bolted down the body is actually because when you put these bodies on the frame, there's a little bit of movement. So when you bolt it down, it's gonna pull that body in a certain direction, and it's gonna pull it how it wants to be pretty much on the frame. So that's why you wanna make sure that your body is bolted to your frame before you do any of this metal work that you're not really sure about. When we do our gaps and everything like that, that is a big time that you want to make sure everything is bolted up, because say if it's not bolted up, you get your gap perfect. The problem is when you bolt it up, it's gonna move and that gap is gonna change. So it is all bolted up and we're pretty much ready to go on this quarter. So I'm gonna start by taking some measurements off of the quarter that we know that's good. And then we are going to transfer those measurements over to this quarter and see what we have to do to get this quarter to fit into place. And I don't know if I actually showed you guys what was going on with this quarter. It is way long on this bottom. I mean, probably 1 inch long on this bottom, and the top is actually lined up right where it's supposed to be. This is also low where the light goes, and so I just have to figure out what's off. That way we can cut it and move everything where it needs to be. So let's get those measurements taken and see what's going on. Okay, so I pretty much got the quarter screwed into place. I took tons of measurements off of both sides to kind of see what's going on with the rear of this. Every single spot that I took a measurement off of this, it's actually 1/4 to 1/8 inch off on this side, just in the rear. And that's why we're having all of these fitment issues back here. Once all of these measurements start piling up on each other, because a 1/4 inch really isn't that much, but once you have 1/4, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, that's when you really start to have issues. So that's why it's off so much on the bottom. So what I decided I'm gonna do is I got the quarter pretty much screwed into place. So this is pretty much where the quarter is going to live. What I'm gonna do now is I'm going to take off the wheel. We're gonna pull the quarter back off one more time, and we're gonna see how the outer wheel well will fit. It's probably gonna fit just like the other side. And if it does fit like the other side, we're gonna have to do a lot of modifications to make it fit. So the quarter is gonna have to come on and off a couple of times doing the mock-up of the outer wheel well. But once we get the outer wheel well mocked up, then we could pretty much finish up this outside. So let's get started, get the wheel torn off, and let's get this outer wheel well mocked up.
Now, I'm not kidding when I say this wheel well needed so much fabrication to get it to fit. I actually had to cut it up into 3 pieces. So there's that main middle section right there in the middle, and then I cut the front bottom off and then the rear bottom off, just because they were completely the wrong shape. So once I reshaped the bottom, then I welded it to the middle section, and then I also welded the rear to the middle section, but I had to do a ton of test fitting to make sure everything fit correctly. And in order to keep that wheel well lip exactly where it was, because if it moves, then it wouldn't match the quarter. So what I did was I pretty much just cut it out piece by piece and then tacked that in. So I did it in like 9 sections. That way nothing moved. And then I also kept fitting up the quarter to make sure everything fit correctly.
Okay guys, so I made a little bit of progress. So I got the quarter mocked up one more time just because I'm almost done with the outer wheel well right there. It's about 90%. I just have this little bottom piece left. Now that actually sits in right there. You can see where there is a gap. And now I'm kind of to the point where I can't get that piece in until I get the bottom of this quarter modified. So remember, it sits about 2 inches low and all of my measurements are off about an 1/8 inch, which is usually what happens with these aftermarket panels. So I actually have to throw on my rear bumper first, and I actually grabbed it out from the shop. It's right there. But in order to throw it on, I need bolts, and I don't have them. So I'm gonna have to grab those bolts tomorrow morning. As of right now, I do have to get the deck lid thrown on just because the bottom of the deck lid lines up with the top of the rear bumper. So I wanna make sure that everything is right where it's going to be when this car is finished. That way we can make all of the modifications that we have to do to the bottom of the quarter.
So like I said, the deck lid has to go on first because that has to be lined up evenly with the quarters. Once I know that that is lined up good and it's got good gaps on both sides and it's straight horizontally, then I can get the rear bumper mocked up because that lines up horizontally with the deck lid. And I have to do all that to see how the rear bumper fits against the new quarter panel.
Okay, so I got the deck lid on and pretty much lined up. All the gaps look okay, except on this side. If you come over here, it's almost touching right there. Now that's how it was when the Cutlass came to me, but we are definitely going to fix that and make it look a little bit nicer. But I'm actually kind of stuck right now just because I'm waiting on a couple parts to come in. I found out that the door hinges were bad on this because I was gonna throw on the doors, get those lined up. So I'm actually gonna have to place an order, get some door hinges coming, get some strikers and latches for the doors, also strikers and latches for the tailgate, get some new hood hinges and a striker and latch for the hood, just so that we can get everything coming at once. That way we can get it all assembled and nothing's going to stop us. This is really one of the hard parts of building these cars, is because there's so many different things that you have to have. And a lot of times it's really hard to plan ahead and have everything here when you need it. So I'm going to go ahead and place a big order and hopefully get all of that stuff here next week-ish. And then we're going to be able to finish up most of the metalwork in the rear of the Cutlass. It really is coming along. There's still so much we have to do, but trust me, it is almost there. I'm really trying to get all of the metalwork finished by the end of this month on the Cutlass and on the Blazer. So I've got a lot of work ahead of me, but I really think it's possible. So I know I said I would finish the quarter in this one, but you know, life happens, and I mean, it is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it. So I promise in the next one, I'm gonna finish up the outer wheel well, finish up the quarter, get really the entire rear of the car finished up. Hopefully gonna have the car assembled, and then it'll be off to epoxy and bodywork next. So a lot of cool work gonna happen to this car, and it's really gonna start taking shape in the next couple of weeks. So I just wanna say thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for liking and subscribing. Really appreciate it. And I hope you guys are liking this content, liking this build. Really trying to get through this build because the next one is gonna be the Chevelle, and I'm so excited to work on that one. So on that note, I will see you guys next time. Peace out.